Hello, this presentation is about web accessibility. The list of topics for this presentation will be definitions and players, the case for web accessibility, guidelines, and a proposed roadmap towards accessibility. Now, the first player in web accessibility is really anyone contributing to a website or web application. It includes developers, designers, content editors, and art creators. Art creators and of course content writers are a big part now since they're a big they contribute quite a bit to the website or web application, especially art directors, where they're going to actually create images and designs for the web. And there's actually guidelines for instance, contrast ratios for graphics. That's a big part of the guidelines. Now, give you a little background. The World Wide Web Consortium is actually an organization by community members, actually global members, that come together and they actually decide on standards, protocols, and guidelines that the web community follow. So they all get together and actually do standards. For instance, the HTML5 standard did come out of the W3C, and that's what anybody dealing with the web will actually look for and look at to guide them through the present time and the future guidelines for anything dealing with the web. Now, the W3C was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, who was actually creator of the World Wide Web. Now, out of the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, came out an initiative called the Web Accessibility Initiative, in which they needed to address web accessibility. And they went ahead and created an internal group within the W3C. And out of the WAI came out the WCAG, which stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are the de facto guidelines now being used by web industries, web entities everywhere for compliance for web accessibility. Now, the DOJ, get ahead of everybody here, they actually looked for these guidelines during some of their court cases they've had recently. Okay, the WAI also comes out with a accessibility application suite. It's called the WAI-ARIA, Accessibility Rich Internet Application Suite. Now, this is not mandated. It's a guideline that they gave out. And as you see, for an example, in the yellow box on the right, you'll see there's a list item. This is just a plain, simple HTML statement, which the role is going to be a menu item checkbox. Just like any form, you check it for true and check it for false. Now, you'll notice that it says ARIA-checked equals true. That's part of the application suite, and it actually tells screen readers the state of that checkbox. You'll notice in this case it's true, so that box should be labeled true. Now, if the user unchecks it to where the ARIA checked equals false, the developer's code must actually change that true state to a false state. So this actually gives a little more information for a screen reader, for instance, to actually see what the status of that checkbox is. Okay, another player is the U.S. government. They're the ones behind the 508, 504, and the ADA that I'm going to go through just a little bit. And of course, the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in employment, state and local governments, and so forth. And DOJ, they're the ones real busy at the moment, looking to see how they can intervene with entities and how they work accessibility in their web platforms. They are supposed to come out with some guidelines this year. As of today, they have not. It's been delayed quite a few times, but these are the guidelines that will be mandated for any website or web applications. Okay, the case for web accessibility, pretty simple, cut dry. Equal access, equal opportunities for diverse people with diverse abilities. Benefits old users. Improves SEO, search engine optimization. That's always a must. It's really corporate responsibility to do the right thing. Section 504 is a civil rights law. 508 is also a law related to IT or private sector entities with a contract for federal government. And of course, legal issues. And you'll see the Department of Justice has been involved with the National Federation of the Blind versus Target versus H&R Block and EDX online courses. And they've also had a case against Netflix. And with Netflix, the interesting was they, of course, is a streaming video service that did not have closed caption. A little surprising, but it's true. And they were taken to court, and they lost the court battle in which they had to add closed caption. That really is a standard now. H&R Block did not have any web accessibility on any of their websites, mobile applications, or their tax filing utilities. So as you see, the DOJ made them conform to a WCAG 2.0 guidelines, just like the WAI proposed. WCAG are the guidelines for web accessibility. And they agreed to appoint a skilled web accessibility coordinator, adopt policies, and they also did training. And of course, at the last, they paid a fine. Now, edX is an online course via the web where you can sign up for classes. It was created by Harvard and MIT, and anybody can go up there, sign up for classes. There might be a fee, there may be not, in which you can actually learn classes, instructions from different universities. Now, interesting enough, they have some video within their online courses that did not have closed captioning, and that was one of their biggest failures to comply with web accessibility. So they had to do a number of things. They actually appointed a web accessibility coordinator, adopt policies. They did have solicit feedback from learners. They conducted training, and at the end they had to retain a consultant to evaluate their performance for the website platform and mobile applications. Now I'm going to talk about 508. 508 is part of the Rehabilitation Act of '73. And the important thing is 508 is valid only for federal websites, but not the private sectors. So unless the website or web application is provided under a contract to the federal agency, then 508 does not apply. But if you are going to create, or if the government has to use a website or application, any software, even phone systems, then they must look at Section 508. If the federal government is going to use it, 508 is the guidelines they're going to look at. And as you can see, there's a link to the standards guides for 508. 504. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of '73. And in this case, 504 covers any program that receives federal funding. So, for example, if a person wishes to fill out a web-based form, sign up for a class but cannot due to disability, then they must have another avenue to actually fill out that form. So, like again, receiving government funds, Section 504. And the key point of 504 is, once again, if you create a form or anything via the website or application, you must give the user another avenue to fill out that form. It's sort of like when a building has stairs and they are required to create a ramp. That's another avenue of accessibility for people to enter the building. In the web case, for instance, if you're filling out a form, there must be another way. For instance, a phone number or maybe a link to an email. There must be another way for that person to sign up for whatever event is that form is designated for. Okay, the WCAG, Web Accessibility Guidelines. You'll see links here that can be copied right into your browser and go straight into the guidelines. But it's intended for web authors, it's really anybody interested in the accessibility guidelines for today. Each guideline, or at least most of them, have 3 levels of conformance. A is the lowest, the minimum. Mid-range is AA, and AAA is the highest you can get to. And what I've noticed is some of the AAA is very hard to attain, but it's not required. What's required is mostly the A, and I've seen DOJ say they must apply with the AA. So it all really depends. Okay, so 1.1 of the guidelines itself is asking for providing text alternatives. And what that means is images, anything graphics, you must provide a text alternative so the screen reader can read it to the user. They cannot see the graphics, so there must be a description about that graphic or image. Those are actually used today. It's the alt attribute that the web designers and web developers use. The key thing is it's got to be standard among all graphics or all images. Provide synchronized alternatives for multimedia. Basically, any multimedia has got to have an alternative way of describing what the multimedia is. For instance, closed captioning. That's an easy example. 1.3, create content that can be presented in different ways. For instance, if you take the website and if you just strip out just the content, it must not lose any of its information or structure. It must actually be clear to the user what it is. Make it easier for people with disabilities to see and hear content, including separating foreground and background. This is the contrast ratio that I was talking about earlier. You want graphics to really have a contrast versus the foreground and background. For instance, you don't want a blue colored text on a black colored background. Very hard to see. 2.1, make all functionality available from a keyboard. You'll notice on websites now, if you use your tab key, you can actually cycle through elements. And that includes forms too. You can actually cycle through form fields. Provide users with disabilities enough time to read and use. You've got a lot of movement on some websites, especially with sliding images or sliding ads or sliding text. You want to make sure that there's enough time between each movement for the user to read. Do not create content that is known to cause seizures, and I hope everybody's not doing this. Basically, seizures can be caused by bright lights, fast motion, anything that's really abrupt on the website or application. Everything needs to slow down and really be very careful on the colors being used. Those bright colors can cause a lot of havoc. 2.4, provide ways to help users with disabilities navigate, find content, determine where they are. Standard, of course, is to have a menu on the top, but maybe additional breadcrumbs to know where you're at, especially a header to know what section of the website or application you're actually at the moment. 3.1, make text content readable and understandable. You want to make sure, like I said previously, that the body of the content is clear and simple. Those days are over where you fill it with every little bit of information. The web has changed now. It's got to be clear and understandable to all users. Make web pages appear and operate in predictable ways. Basically, you want to make sure if you see one site and you create a site, they're in simple manner, meaning a header's on the top, a footer's on the bottom, and the body contents in the middle. If you hit a submit button, it's actually going to submit something. If there's a link, then that link needs to do something. Underline is usually the standard for a link, so that's kind of in predictable ways. You predict, you acknowledge that that link is actually going to go to another section of the site. You want to help users avoid and correct mistakes that do occur. A good example is this: if you're filling out a web form and that form field requires just numeric characters and you put in text characters, C, H, X, or Y, that form needs to give feedback to let the user know that this field does not take characters, only numeric type characters. The form does not take text characters like C and H, alphabetical characters. It only takes numeric. So you want to give feedback to the user that that's what's required within that field. 4.1, maximize compatibility with current future user agents. Well, user agents really is software on behalf of the user. For instance, a mail software program is a user agent on behalf of the user. A web browser is a user agent on behalf of the user. It goes out and looks and brings in and downloads web applications or websites. So there's actually a maintainability to make sure that the current and future user agents do have these assistive technologies. Okay, anyways, the proposed roadmap divided into 3 phases, very simplistic, very top level. Phase 1 is identifying accessibility tools, demo review, really a research and information gathering to see where we're at, to see what tools will be used and beneficial, and everybody can agree upon them. And phase 2 is actually the execution of accessibility to actually comply, tools to audit, use the tools to audit and conform to accessibility standards, the act of actually complying our sites and applications to web accessibility guidelines. And then phase 3 is actually review. Once the guidelines are achieved, you want to make sure you do a final review and how to maintain those accessibility levels. And this concludes the web accessibility presentation. And like I mentioned before, it's an ongoing process, and with every month the DOJ should get closer in deciding what guidelines they want to pursue for the whole web community. Thanks very much.